All the roads are winding.
So welcome to the show. I would say welcome back, but I think you were officially on Dream, Freedom, Beauty before we were Earth Speak. So welcome to your first time on Earth Speak. Welcome back to the podcast overall. Hi, Chanelle.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you. So honored and pleased to be here. I love seeing you and chatting with you.
It is always a delight to hang out with you, and I'm so grateful you're here. Would you like to set the space for us?
Sure. So, I guess if you are able to, I just want to invite everyone to take a moment to arrive in the space. And you can do that first by, again, if you're able, closing your eyes. You can also just soften your gaze and drop any other things you might be doing. And we'll use this time to drop in together. You can take a few nice breaths, not anything too special or forced. Just breathe easy into yourself. And I want to invite each of you to take a few moments to pray or offer heart devotion to those who guide and nourish you. Do that in any way that feels good for you, that resonates with you. Just take this time to connect. You might want to gently rub your palms together or any other soft, nice movements. And before we jump into everything, I wanted to leave you with this blessing. May my words light your path. May they speak to you with clarity. May they offer support to your highest good. May my words be a servant for your walk. So, whenever you're ready, you can start to kind of come on out of this space and open your eyes, and here we are.
Thanks for that. I love that little blessing.
You're welcome.
So, what are your ancestral lineages?
Yeah, it's a good question. And one that I was kind of have always been curious about myself. I have a lot of orphans on both my mother's and father's side of my family. So there were many times in my life where I was seeking my ancestry. And recently, I would say over the past year or so, I've felt more like a settling. I don't have all the answers, but I do feel like I'm settled and sunk in more with what I do know. And so what I do know is that on my mother's side, her father was Lithuanian. He's not alive any longer. And on my father's side, there's a lot of Scottish, Irish, British, and some French sprinkled in there. So that's, I guess, the majority of what I'm made from. I'm not sure what my maternal grandmother's lineage is. So she's the big missing link for me, but she doesn't know either. And that was kind of like the source of a lot of my seeking. But again, I feel much more settled in what I do know, and settling into that, and instead of kind of searching out, has actually shifted so much in how I feel embodied and connected. I've been really doing a lot of deep dives into my Celtic ancestry over the past year. And just listening to a lot of stories and music and trying to find out about little plant medicine stories and things like that. Listening to the language of Gaelic and Gaelic has been absolutely transformative too. So, yeah, if anyone else is feeling that way, that they don't really quite know where they're from, but they might know a little bit, I would just say start really sinking into that because it feels so good to kind of rest into it.
Cool. That's wild that you had orphans on both sides. That's so I no one's ever shared that on the podcast. So very different.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because it's my mom's mom and my dad's dad. Well, my dad's dad and his mom. My great grandparents are kind of a mystery. And I never met my mom's father. He passed away when she was little. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of kind of like mysteriousness, I guess, that surrounds it all. But I remember once I had a tarot reading. This was so long ago. I'm trying to remember. Maybe in like 2012 or 2013, but my one reader, Heather, from this shop in Portland, Maine called Stones and Stuff, she gave me this reading. And I think it was maybe even the first reading she gave me, but she kind of like stopped for a second and she was like, "Wait, are you an orphan?" And I was like, "No." And, but I have a lot of orphans in my ancestral kind of story. But I just thought that was so interesting because I think I understand why she was asking that now. But yeah, she's amazing. I highly recommend if anyone, either if you're in Portland, I think she does distance readings as well, but Stones and Stuff. The things that she has shared with me have stuck with me more than any other reading I've ever received. So she's very wonderful.
Highly rated.
Her little plug.
Amazing. And where in the world are you and who are the original people of that land?
Yeah, so I'm currently in North Carolina. I live right on the border of Raleigh and Garner, and this is originally Tuscarora land. I've been living here for almost 5 years, I guess. Yeah. And live with my partner and our 2 cats and our dog and our gardens. So that's where I am.
Awesome. Wow. So something I've been thinking a lot about is last year you left social media. So you're an herbalist, you have a business, you do, consultations, you sell products, and you're like, peace out, Instagram, I'm done. What fueled that? What spurred that? And what has your experience been like since?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like it was a long time coming that I wanted to be leaving, and it just, not to make anyone feel bad about Instagram, but it does have this way of just kind of like sticking its claws into you, and then you have a really hard time I had a really hard time managing my relationship to it. I shouldn't speak in generalities. And like anytime I thought I might leave, it would just kind of draw me back in. And I think a lot of that had to do with desiring to make my work known and be a part of this larger community. But I was just getting oversaturated, and I was starting to get really out of my body and just noticing that I wasn't taking care of myself in the ways that I normally would. I was feeling really drained energetically and emotionally, and I'm someone that really throws my emotions and energetic body into everything that I do, which is like kind of annoying. But I am so like sincere, and I just don't think that I could handle sustainably being on Instagram for those reasons. I just would put so much of my heart onto this little tiny box and then just feel like, why, even if people liked it and were responding, which I'm so grateful for, I would still feel like, why did this not actually like satisfy something deeper in me? And why do I feel like I just kind of cut a piece of myself off and like sent it out into the ether? And so I was like really starting to feel not only like mental and emotional drain, just because when you're on your screen for so long, especially on Instagram or Facebook or even your emails, your brain thinks that you're working. Like there have been studies that just came out that say, you know, your brain actually thinks that when you're looking at a screen, you're supposed to be in work mode. So you're never actually resting. And so I would be like, oh, I'm just going to relax and like look at pretty pictures from my friends on Instagram. But I wasn't actually relaxing on an internal level. I was like working, laying down, or sitting down or whatever. And it just started to become too much like internally for me. And then externally or physically rather, I just was starting to feel like it was getting like I would just all of a sudden lose 30 minutes in a day that I could have been on a walk. And so I was just starting to feel really disembodied. The longer and more time I gave to, the longer time I spent, the more time I gave to that app. And so, you know, it was very much in conflict with like, not only what my work is, but the majority of my life up until recently. I didn't have an iPhone until I was almost 30, and I'm 33 now. For most of my 20s, either lived in places that didn't have internet or didn't have electricity. So I just wasn't used to that relationship with a screen. And I think kind of throwing myself into it in the name of my apothecary, it was never going to work. And it would have an expiration date, and it was just about when that would happen. And I think like, you know, with the pandemic and just the past year that we've had in 2020, a lot of people found solace in Instagram, and I found like I was drowning with information, and it was just very loud for me. I don't know how to describe it otherwise. And there were so many conversations that were so important that were happening, and I deeply wanted to be a part of them, and I tried to be a part of them. And then I realized that like I could be a part of all of the things about Instagram that I enjoyed by not being on there. And so I just started taking little breaks, and then it would kind of turn into like a longer week or so. And then, yeah, I gave myself a day, which was Lunastal, the 1st of August, to make my final post. And I was like, sayonara, I'm off, and I'm leaving this page up because I put like hours and hours and hours of my life into this. So it's like a little kind of mausoleum or something at this point. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. There's a lot, I think there are a lot of like specifics and things like that I could share, but I feel like in general, it was honestly, if I were to just sum it up, it was sucking my life away, and I could not have that happen any longer. And that's, again, something very personal for me. And so I don't want anyone to feel judged by that at all. Like I said, that's my personality. I'm very intimate, and I go very deep, like right away. And you can chalk that up to my astrology or not. I'm also deeply romantic. And so I'm going to like pour my whole self into something. And I don't think everyone does that on Instagram, but I was. So I needed to make an executive decision. And it's been amazing since being off, honestly. I I can't tell you how differently I feel. It is like a night and day experience, and I just feel so much more grounded, and I'm so much more invested in all of these beautiful rituals and routines that I have in my day. I'm conversing with people and clientele in the ways that I want to be, which is more kind of like long form. We're speaking via email or sending letters sometimes. Things have slowed down, but they've also gotten more like, it's not like I've lost clientele at all. That's the thing. It's like it's slowed down, but it's become very full. And so there's something really digestible happening with my practice right now, which is great. And I've just been kind of turning my energy towards doing other work in the apothecary, like starting a journal where I do little interviews with people that I release once a month. And, my newsletters I'm really devoted to. I'm bringing back the newspaper that I took a break from. There's just a lot more space for me to be kind of devoting to the types of communication that I want. And it just took me a few years to realize like Instagram wasn't the type of communication that was for me, and it wasn't my style, and it's not what I wanted. And it's like very beautiful. And honestly, I've met so many incredible people through that platform. But like I said, I was starting to feel oversaturated to this point where I was like, what? There has to be a different way of doing this. And I don't believe that in order to have a business, you have to be on Instagram. Like, I think that's one of the biggest lies of our time. And I just want, that is one statement I'm going to say, like, as a general thing, like, I don't think you need Instagram to have a successful business. And there are so many ways of connecting with people and connecting with community. I don't know. That's my soapbox, though.
Okay, well, answer me this then. How are you getting new clients in business? It's almost like seems impossible.
I don't know, honestly. I think it's a lot of it is word of mouth. But then there are people that contact me. Like, I just had 2 people contact me recently. And I should have asked them how they found me. But I honestly, like, definitely word of mouth is a huge, huge part of my practice. And I mean, I've been practicing for quite some time now, and so I have a lot of clientele behind me, and they have, their own communities. And so I get a lot of people referring to me. And then people just somehow seem to find me. And I think that that's kind of like this really amazing thing that can happen, if you step back a little bit, and you kind of like allow people to find you instead of pushing yourself out, looking and seeking people. I don't know, maybe it is the energy of the universe or something, but people will find you. So the only things I can say maybe are that it's through word of mouth and referrals. And then I'm sure the shops that carry my products, I'm sure people are like, oh, who is this? And then they come and find me. But there are people that sign up for my newsletter or reach out for a consultation or purchase things from the apothecary where I'm like, oh, I wonder, I've never seen this name before. And I wonder how they found me.
Yeah, it might be cool to start asking. I'm curious. And I think that's, and I think there are a lot of people, there has been this wave of people being like so sick of Instagram, but and they're like, I'm taking a break. Then they come back and they're like, all right. And they just don't know how to actually, get off of Instagram. I personally don't have a problem with it. I mean, I do have a problem scrolling a little too long sometimes, but I'm like, I also don't run my business's Instagram. We hired someone to do that for us. So it's totally, I haven't personally posted in 4 years on my personal account. But I just use it to, go like look up memes and send them to my friends and or my sisters mostly, and Shauna, and just like, I don't know, mess around.
I don't know. I think when it's fun like that, and it's not that you can't have fun posting for your business. You can, but
Right,
there's
right.
ulterior motive, which isn't a negative thing, but the motive is like, this is what I have. Come find me and like come look at it and come get it. And there's absolutely, absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for me, that became less and less fun.
Well, it's amazing because you recognize like this just isn't correct for me. And that's so beautiful. And I think people, so much of what we've been taught is like, you have to figure out how to make yourself work for this thing that is this external thing that's the way it's supposed to be. And we're like, no, wait, like this doesn't work for me. So what else is possible? What else can, we contort a lot. And, it's just from your share. I feel like people can have an insight into recognizing whether something's working for themselves or not, whether it's Instagram or a relationship or a food or, it's like, these are such big, huge, you're so intuitive. And just disclaimer, y'all, Chanelle and I have gotten to hang out IRL and had so much fun because we used to both live in the same Tri-City area. And like, you're just like, pew, zoom, like you're so perceptive and tuned in. And I can imagine, just like there's other things to be doing and other ways of tuning and engaging. And I don't know, I think it's cool that you've just done that and shared how it worked for you. And I feel like someone out there could be resonating with that and be like, yeah, actually, I'm going to see what else is possible.
I really like the sound effect that you made with the but I also was just going to say, yeah, I mean, I think, thank you. And also, I don't know, like, I think just by the nature of how I kind of like what my formative years were, I just didn't have a lot of computer time. And so I think that when I've been like reflecting on it, I think that really helped me because I really didn't have, I mean, I had a Facebook and I would like kind of post on there, but not with like a ton of frequency. But I never really had this kind of full on relationship with social media. And so I think that in some ways that really helped me to just be like, wait, what is going on? Because I had something to compare it to. And so for me, I had like, I wasn't comparing myself to like how I was like in when I was 23 or something, but I was like, I did notice that I had more time to play music or like read a book of poetry in the morning or whatever, there were just things that were quite literally absent from my life that could not be absent any longer. And it was because I was like putting all of my time into Instagram, trying to sell things or connect with people or share about plants. And then the rest of my time was going towards my clients. And so I was just kind of like, where am I in all of this? And so that was a huge reclamation. And I think because I had my own personal experience growing up and prior to getting on Instagram at all, then that really like shifted how I was able to just kind of devote myself to leaving it, because I was just like, I never did this before. This was an experiment to begin with. It was fun for a small time. I met some beautiful, brilliant, amazing, incredible, wonderful people from all over the world. I'm still talking to them. I can't know everyone. Like, I don't know. It's just, there were so many things that were coming up, and now I have time to do all of these things that I like to do, like playing the harp and writing and walking and like being in the garden. And, my day is so full of things that I want to be doing and that I need to be doing. So anyway, yeah, I feel like I'm just kind of circling back around to what I said before, but
well, it's cool because, I want to ask you about how did your intuitive senses develop? Like, were they always there as a kid? And some things that go hand in hand are intuition and creativity. And I think, so often I find people expecting that their intuition is somehow different than their imagination. And like, there's, and I'm like, well, for a lot of people, actually, the experience of your intuition is actually happening as if it were your imagination. But it's just learning to, like, your imagination isn't just fantasy and makeup and playtime. It's like an actual space where information comes through and where your own, from the external, and where your own creative internal visions and inspirations bubble up to be put out into the external world. And so I see you here, you're working on creative writing, and you got playing the harp, and like your life is just like a lot of, poetry, creativity, and intuition. And I'm curious, you said your childhood was, you didn't have social media. It was, a lot of the way you were brought up, you think, informs how you are now and the choices you've made. And how were you brought up, and how did that affect your intuitive development and your creative expression?
Yeah, I mean, before I go into that, something that you said really resonated with me. And I really 100% believe that imagination is not different than reality. I mean,
Yes.
It's simply not. Like, the fact that we have anything at all, like, look around your room and
Right.
the fact that you have a mug, a book, a lamp,
a phone,
like
a computer,
or a computer is
an internet,
someone's imagination, and it's been put into our hands and our day-to-day life, and it's spread across the globe. And so, I mean, Bjork has a great song. Dang it, I can't remember the name now.
How does it go?
I can't even think about how it goes now. But there's a line in it where she's talking about how she's like staring at this mountain, and she's describing that inside of the mountain are all of these like machines, and that she's essentially saying in the song, everything has already been here, and we just kind of uncovered it and we brought it out. And even these technologies and things, they've already all been here. And it's just taken this long, or at this particular moment, for this thing to emerge. But they've all just been waiting, like in the side of a mountain, or, at the bottom of some lake somewhere. But it's a beautiful thing to think about, because I do think what you said is true. Like, people get really caught up in this idea that imagination is just this fantasy, like unicorns and, I don't know,
daydreams. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I mean, those things are so nutritive, first of all. Like, daydreaming is absolutely nourishing to the spirit.
So are unicorns.
And unicorns, of course. That goes without saying. But yeah, I truly don't believe that imagination is not, or is like antagonistic to reality. And I don't really know where that came from.
The freaking machine. And I mean, if we want to go back, I don't know.
No, totally. I'm just like, when did this start? Because I do feel like, I don't know, there are plenty of examples of people that still, believe that imagination is what kind of like makes the world turn. And we need people with imaginative, creative mindsets to discover new species of plants, or come up with solutions to global climate change, and to like discover this new supernova up in a different galaxy somewhere. So,
or to make the music that you all listen to the soundtrack of your life.
Definitely. Indeed. And like the nice, fabrics that we wear and things we adorn ourselves with. And there's just so much that we're wearing, literally, people's imagination, or we're appreciating or drinking out of, or holding other people's imagination come into life when we do literally anything. Even like certain dance moves where like some person just being like, I'm going to try out this weird shimmy, and then like, I don't know, whatever. And they did it. And then it just spread and people do it now, like the electric slide or something. So yeah, I just wanted to say that because I think imagination is so important, and it's something that I really fear we're losing, especially in younger, like in children and younger generations of people. And I'm saying that because like I've worked at schools teaching poetry in schools, and these kids have like no time to imagine.
Oh, so it's like, it's not even about, whether or not they have the imaginative capacity. I mean, I think we all do, but they don't have the space, the time. And what's filling up all that time?
I mean, anything that will get you to college.
Uh-huh. It's all focused on this one big outcome. I mean, you asked where did this come from? I feel like, you're saying like they're all going to get to college. And this reminds me of like the co-opting of certain religions that are like, you had to do everything right so you get to heaven because it's everlasting and it affects the rest of your eternity. It's like this huge thing. And if you get it wrong, you're so screwed. And this idea is relatively new in time. It's only the last few thousand years that this idea really came to the surface. And so, this, I feel like that when I say the machine, this is part of that machine. It's like this co-opting of our imaginative power all towards feeding this thing that's going to like, I mean, you all know, I don't need to get on the rant, but that's what I'm meaning. And so I see that similarity in like religion and get to college. And this is just, we're all so focused on this outcome that's going to affect the rest of our lives or the rest of eternity or whatever. It's like everything has such high stakes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And, it's like people are trying to prepare for the real world. And I'm like, it's made up of all the things we just described, things that people had to imagine into being. And, I mean, like, I'm sure so many people that are listening have heard at least one story of a school in their community or someone that they care about who, these schools don't have art classes anymore. They don't have music classes anymore. And it's not that art and music are the only way to imagine, but they do allow us to have space to imagine. And they do allow us to experiment with our imagination in ways that some of these more kind of core classes like math or history or something, they're very structured and they're very much boxed into, these are the rules, these are the things that you need to do to get from point A to point B. So it's an unfortunate thing that is happening right now, that a lot of the priority in our culture is not on how do we support artists and creatives and imaginative people from a very young age. And for me, like, you asked my story of growing up, and I am the oldest of 3 children. And I don't know, like, it's not, I mean, I always felt really imaginative and creative when I was little. And my mom actually has taken photos of pretty much our whole childhood and also videos of that. And she actually sent me one of those little sticks.
Yeah, USB stick. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And it had all these videos on it from when I was really young.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm just like singing, making up stories, like dancing. I had on all of these like really cool fashion outfits, like 16 necklaces. And I think I always had that way about me. And my parents were like, okay, like they didn't kind of push that out of me. And I mean, my mom is very creative and imaginative. And I think my brother and sister are too in their own ways. It looks different than mine. And it's just something that I feel really grateful for that my parents did value. And there was always music in the house, and there was always art around, and there were always books everywhere. And, those things were always very valued. And we went to plays, and, just there were lots of things that we did when I was younger in forming my sense of value in the world that kind of like brought me into more of those spaces, more of those creative or artistic spaces. And I think the other thing that is really coming up when you ask me, like, where did some of this originate in me? I was a swimmer for my whole life, pretty well, not my whole life. I have to stop saying that because now I'm like almost older than, yeah, now I'm trailing off. But I started swimming at a very young age. I was probably 5, and I stopped swimming when I was 18. And I swam all year round, sometimes twice a day, before school and after school, and 6 days a week, and swim meets. And being in the water is still the place that I'm at the most at home. Even though I love the plant world and I'm very much a part of that now, and tend to the land, it took me a long time to get my land legs in more ways than one. Which is to say, I'm a late bloomer. And being in the water though, like, even if you're not a swimmer and you just take a bath or take a shower or go to the pool or something, that element just allows you to imagine and to dream. And when you're swimming for like 2 hours, and it really is so hard and you can't get out, and so you just start to daydream and imagine things. I mean, that's what I would do. Like, I was a hardcore swimmer. I was being trained to be an Olympian, so I was swimming like a lot of miles, a lot of days of the week. And I think for me, the water was both this, like, interestingly enough, like, place of deep discipline and structure, which water is very structured as an element. But I think that oftentimes we don't think of water as like a structure as much as like the earth or something. But it was both deeply structuring and my place of discipline, because I was at the pool swimming more than I was at home often. And it was also the place where I had some of my best ideas, and I would like write poems in my head, or I would like just kind of daydream about anything while swimming. And sometimes it was the only thing to get me through a set. And I mean, we had some pretty tough sets to get through. And for people that don't know what that means, it's like a set is like, how do I describe that? It's like you're given a certain amount of laps to swim, and you have to do it on a certain timeline. And it's usually pretty fast and quite a lot.
I'm like, I can doggy paddle over here.
I mean, it took up a lot of my life. I mean, I had time for other things, and then as I got older, I wanted time for other things, and that's ultimately why I left swimming like that. I mean, I was never that kind of I feel very ambitious, but when I was swimming to compete, I would get extremely nervous and overwhelmed by that. And so that started to get really draining on me too. And when I was in college, the first year I was there, I was swimming. I was on a full scholarship at Drexel, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I did my season and my first year at school, and then I dropped out of both and moved around and started hanging out with all these poets and writing all the time and traveling, and then going to herb school and then midwifery school, and now I'm here.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't know if that totally answered it, but I feel like I'm not entirely sure if there were any exact moments, other than that was something that was supported, and then I had a space that I could call my own, which was in the pool, that I could have that time and really value that time. And like, it was my secret safe, like, space for that, I guess.
Well, this is so interesting. I had forgotten about your swimming history and that it came up because it makes sense of like you're Scorpio, so you got the waters going and you spent 13 years swimming, like hardcore swimming. So you were in the water all the time and now like essencing is such a big part of your life. So you have this deep connection with water. And it's cool to see how it's shifted. Like even though you're not a swimmer anymore, now you're still in deep relationship with water in this way. And when did essencing emerge for you? And what is it for people who are like, what are you talking about, Natalie? Like, what is it?
Yeah, well, I guess flower essences came up when I finally decided to go to herb school. So plant medicine had always been a huge interest of mine growing up, and we always had these like beautiful gardens, and it was around in like this kind of peripheral way. And then as I got older, I was like, okay, how do I get more into this? And so I would just try to self-teach, and then finally I was like, all right, I'm going to school. And I went to a school in Western New York, and that was where flower essences really started to come to me, but not from my instructor, but rather from like the people I was in my class with. And I was like, oh, what is that? I've never heard of that before. And then as soon as I found out what they were, I was like, oh, I'm definitely making these and like in love with these. And so it was really funny. I went to a very clinical, very kind of like no essences, no homeopathics, just the like physiological side of herb school. And then I left being like, essences.
That's awesome. I feel like that's me with like, I went to a soil science master's and I left and I'm like, earth intuition.
It's funny, like, I feel like that totally makes sense, though, the soil science, earth intuition connection, because once you start learning about the soils and the minerals, you're just like, oh my gosh, and it gives you that language. And that's the thing, like, when you have the language, then you're into that intuitive kind of connection with anything. So yeah, I guess I started learning the language of essences, and I started making my own and trying to learn from people in 2010. It's when it really began. And then, yeah, I had a really significant moment with essences. And I just knew from that point on that that was like where I needed to be putting the majority of my attention, with like the medicinal side of loving plants. And that hasn't ever gone away. Like even in times where I felt that I wanted to throw everything up in the sky and completely change everything I was doing, essences always came back. And the plants always came back, and music always came back. Like I was in a really bad house fire right after herb school, and not only somehow did we all make it out alive, which was a miracle, but also somehow my harp and all of my medicine didn't burn. Even though it was on the same floor in the room next, like kind of like across the hall from where the fire was. It just was so bizarre. And I just remember like staring at this house in a coat, and I was completely naked under the coat because I was asleep. And the snow was like up to my knees in Western New York. And I was like, all of my stuff is just going to be gone forever. And then it wasn't. I mean, the things that mattered to me were still there. I got off track, but okay.
That's amazing. Wait, let's hang out here for a second. That's amazing. So that's, I want to go back too and say you said you had a really significant experience with the essences. What was that experience?
Yeah, I think I've told this story. I'm not sure where it was, but I feel like I've told this story before. So maybe some of you have heard it, but I was living in Providence, and this was in 2011. And I started hanging out and working at Pharmacy Herbs, which is the herb shop in Providence, and it's amazing there. And I fell into this crew of like three of the most magical women I've ever met. And their names are Emma Scully, Ariel Afina, and Natalie Balance. And um, yeah, we started doing some consults there, and they were all into herbs and had all been working there for longer than I was, or had been working there rather. And yeah, we started doing consults with people, and essences would just kind of like come up sometimes, like, oh, should we like recommend an essence to this person? And so anyway, like I think it was following one of these consults where we were like, oh, should we include this? I don't know. And I was hanging out with Emma. She was living in the apartment above the apothecary at pharmacy at the time. And so I was up there with her, and I feel like she was trying to like do something important, or like, I don't know. All I know is that I was hyper and like wanted her attention and wanted to play with her. And she was like, you need to go in my room with these boxes of essences and this pendulum, and like not come out until you find an essence for this client and yourself. And I was like, okay, like just so happy that she gave me something to do, because I just like, I mean, I love her so much, and she just like this whole memory is so funny to me, because I don't know if I'm making some of this stuff up or if it really happened, but it was that like moment of just pure like love for her and wanting to hang out with her, and then her being like, okay, go into this room, close the door. Like I feel like I was like her child or something, even though she's not much older than me. I think she's like a year older than me. Anyway, so I'm in her bedroom with these 3 boxes of essences that are all from Woodland Essences. They're one of my favorite companies. And her pendulum, and I'm like, all right, I guess I'll do this. And so I did, and it was just that moment where I'm holding this pendulum and holding it over these boxes, and it like immediately is speaking to me, and it feels like electric or something, or not electric, because it's not exactly like that. It just felt like when I get information, sometimes I'll get like a shiver or like a ripple through my body, and I just kept getting that, and it just was making me so grounded and so present and so quiet that I think I lost track of all time in there. And by the time I came out, Emma was like, what's wrong? And I was like, nothing. I'm just like, I was like hyperactive, and then I was like so like grounded from one side of the door to the other. And yeah, that was the really significant moment, because it was just this like, I don't know what was going on. I don't know if it was just the right time, but I found something in that room, and I can't quite say it's just essences, but that's the medium. And of course I do work with pendulum as well. So yeah, I mean, that's really where it all like super took off, because it was like a low level like interest, like how do I get into this, from that to just completely like becoming devoted to essences. So
That's so cool. I love that. Thanks for sharing. Cool. And so then was the house fire before or after that? Was that
before?
was before it. Okay. So you had already had this experience of like literally life burning to the ground, and you have these things left that are spirits like, hey, this is important and this is important. And you're like, okay.
You don't need anything else, just focus on these two things.
and then later it deepened into the awareness around, okay, plant medicine, herbal medicine, flower essences. And from there you've really evolved into working with essences in a number of ways. Like how do you work with them now? What does that look like for your personal life and perhaps for like with a client?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so they're definitely the main type of medicine that I practice with, both personally and with my clientele and with my students. And for me, on a personal level, they come up in all manner of ways. So I always have an essence that I'm working with each lunar cycle. I use them as offerings on my altar spaces. I put them in things like foods and the apothecary space, which I'm not in at the moment. I don't have internet out there, but yeah, I put different essences in each layer of the paint on the walls and the ceiling. So I think there are like 5 or 6 different essences that are just painted into the walls of that space that are helping me to hold the space. I don't remember what all of them are. If I remember, I feel like I have a list somewhere. I'll share it with you. It can be any essence though. So yeah, I mean, they come up in all these like really kind of like creatively pragmatic ways, like wall paint, but then also in these more personal, spiritual, ritual ways for me. And that's how I encourage my students and my clientele to use them as well. So, I do tarot readings for people. I've had cards since I was 7. So I've been like reading a really long time. And I think maybe even 7 years ago, it was definitely when I was living in Savannah, I started offering my essences as a companion to the readings. So as a way to help facilitate some of the things that come up during a session. And then I also do these intuitive healing sessions with people, which are my favorite. And it's just a lot of storytelling and conversation. And people always walk away with an essence or a blend that contains an essence from there, as well as another remedy. And then recently, my work with essences has really led me into a more kind of, what did Shauna call it? Spiritual ecology.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. It's such a good term. But yeah, it's led me into this more profound relationship with giving back to the earth. And it was actually a practice that I've kind of been doing, but I just didn't realize that it was such a big deal until recently. So essentially that means that I'm giving plant medicine or stone medicine or mineral medicine or environmental medicine back to the earth. And it's in some ways become like almost more meaningful for me to give medicine to the planet than to myself. And I think that it makes sense to give medicine to the earth, not because it necessarily needs it. Sometimes it really does, but because it brings us into relationship with place and with the planet, and it brings us into this kind of thoughtfulness with where we're standing and the places that we visit and where we're walking in the world. And we live in a very lopsided relationship with the planet, where even for me, I feel very conscientious of what I take. I'm still in a lopsided relationship because I take much more than I give to the planet. And so this practice of essencing is specifically how I describe singing to the earth with this medicine, um, and giving back medicine to the earth, and giving my creations to the earth, and giving my devotion and my love and all of this energy to the earth. And it can be both really healing for the planet, but also really healing to any kind of relationship gap that we have with our surroundings. And I think it brings us into really deep relationship with the spirit of the land when we do that. And it brings us into conversation with the spirit of the land when we do something like that. You don't have to necessarily offer an essence, but that's my way of offering and of being in reciprocity and of being in conversation. And it really shifts so much. I feel like just talking about building intuition and building language, not all language is like me speaking to you and giving you names of things. Some language is very subtle. Some language is felt, like music is a language. It's vibrational language, just like essence is. And we can understand music without words. We can understand music on a very deep, visceral level because we understand that language. And so part of this act of essencing and of giving my devotions back to the earth, it's been really profound for building that language and that subtlety of language, that connection and thread of language between myself and place and spirit of the land and the water. And when I say land, I really mean like any part of the landscape, which could be a tree or a river or the ocean. And like I said, it was something that I'd kind of always done, but I never really kind of like intentionally started to pivot towards it until recently. But there are places that I would always give medicine to. And then I started carrying around a bottle anytime I would travel. And I would ask my pendulum, what does this landscape need? And I would bring that essence there and offer it. Anytime I moved from a place, I'd offer medicine to the land. And then anytime I harvest, I either give an essence or a secret or a kiss or whatever I've got with me that day. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
It's really beautiful. I love that. And, I love to make offerings when I'm hiking or something, or, in my yard, of course, to the garden and stuff, to the spirits of the land. And,
I know, I remember when I think you brought like some amaranth or something to Swift Creek with me.
I know, right? Right. And so, and in recent times, I'm like, I don't like, some ecosystems aren't going to be disturbed by a little sprinkling of cornmeal, or a little few flakes of oatmeal or something. Like, they're not going to be disturbed, but some are really sensitive. And, I can acknowledge and offer and say like a song or just a gratitude or something, or a hair. But this idea, I had not even connected the dots of like, I could have or make an essence and just before I go somewhere do that and see like, okay, is this something that the land and the spirits of this land would like to receive? And a drop of water is highly unlikely to affect an ecosystem in any way except vibrationally, which is really cool. I love this.
Yeah, I do too. And I know with food, it can be tricky because you never know who's trying to eat it. I mean, mostly I feel like things are pretty undisturbing, like you were saying. But I think essences are so nice because they just lend themselves to this kind of versatility. And something that I've been really thinking about and trying to understand for myself as well is just like how even when I feel that I am, a very like devoted servant to the land and the gardens and this this type of medicine practice. And, you know, even though I teach this to people and bring my clientele out into this type of thinking, if they haven't ever thought about it already, there's still something that like is missing from building this more I don't know, like seeing the land as something that is living, I guess, is I think that's what I'm trying to say, you know, like I believe that wholeheartedly and I always have. I've always been like obsessed with fairy tales, and I don't even call it animism because I mean, I like that concept, but it's still just a concept, you know, it's like it is what it is. Like, I know that everything has a sentience to it. That's never, ever been a question for me my whole life, which I feel really grateful for. Um, but even in that knowledge, there are still things where I'm like, do I actually treat this space as a living ecosystem? And does that not mean that that living ecosystem also needs attention and medicine in the way that I'm able to offer that to people? And so to humans. And so for me, when I give this type of medicine to a landscape, then it's me entering into this knowledge that like, just like me, or just like you, or just like whoever's over here, no one's over there, but I'm pointing to a potential person. We all need medicine. And so it just brings that living quality and that attention to that and that awareness and that acknowledgement of it into so much stronger focus. And I think that the more you practice that, again, maybe that's just that learning the language of subtlety with the land, or learning the language of the land, which isn't going to speak to you the way that I'm speaking to you. But it really is about kind of re-evaluating and then like reconnecting or re-relating to the land as a sentient being. And so that's been pretty profound for me. Like I said, you know, I do feel like, I don't know, we take, even as herbalists who are trying to be very conscious and oftentimes grow our own medicine, it's still a taking of that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with like growing things to harvest them. You know, that's how we've gotten this far in a lot of cases. And I don't think there's anything wrong in that per se. But I do feel like sometimes there is this kind of like slight disconnect between how do we treat this whole land, you know, and everything on it, because we're on it too. And so the more we can invest in that relationship and share that relationship with others, then who knows what can happen on a larger environmental scale. And it's something that is so simple and easy to do. And then the more you do that, the more protective you become. Like, I'm so protective of all of my clients and students, and I hold space for them even when we're not together, you know? And the more I do that with the land, then it's like, you know, nothing comes between us in that way either. So I think, you know, it's just, it's another, what I guess I'm trying to say is that it's a transposing of how I treat people to how I treat the landscape, and the environment. And I think that any kind of practice that invites that and encourages that and helps to consistently build that relationship in any season at any time of the day is a great one, because then we'll always have access to it. You know, and essence can be anywhere from like $6 to $20. You know, it's not a huge,
or free if you make it, or whatever, cost of materials,
you know, whatever, you know, and so it's something that's very accessible to people. It's something that's very gentle. You know, it's water that has been infused with the vibrant energy of a plant or a stone, and
or a place. You've made amazing place essences. I love the Craggy Mountain one. Oh my God.
That one's so good.
Such
That one
such a
just,
special
I
one.
just am like, that was the first time this is a sidetrack, but Craggy Gardens is in near Asheville. I think it's right outside. And that was the first place I ever felt at home in North Carolina. So
I would say the same for me. I cried. I was on top. I was like in the freaking parking lot, and I was like, "What is this?" Yeah, keep going.
yeah, no, I mean, they're just so, there's like no way to get around how easy essences are.
There's no way to complicate it, y'all.
I think that they're the most simple kind of medicine, and not to say that simple is bad. It's actually really potent, the simplicity. And that's part of why they work so well. But yeah, they're so accessible and they're so easy to just put a drop or a few drops down. And again, it can happen any season, any time of day or night. Any place in the world, you can bring a bottle of an essence and offer it, and then immediately start to build relationship with that place. And it's like a lot of times we assume like, oh, I'm on this land. This land is my land, and like, is that an assumption or is that a truth? And how do we move from assuming that we are like totally in ownership mode over a place, rather moving into one of reciprocity and relationship? So a power with place, not over it. And I think essences are just like, obviously there are so many other ways we can do this, but I think they're just such a great channel and vessel for that type of offering. So that's essencing.
Amazing. Love it. Love it. And there's I don't know. I feel like there's so much. I'm getting really inspired. I'm like, ooh, I want to make an essence of this and an essence of that. And da da da. Like, I got so many ideas right going on right now. And I love what you speak of. Going, basically you said power, from power over to power with, which, to me also translates as like seeing something as an object versus being in relationship with it as an object to use. Like, what are you good for versus like, hi, what's going on? Like, how would you like to be engaged with, and like, what do you need? What do you want? How can I help you? And are there ways you want to help me? What can we co-create together? Or do you want me to leave you alone? Like, it's so different from like, I'm going to extract, which, going back to my forever rant, the machine, extract. Like, I will always be ranting about that. But I think a huge thing, and like something we talk about at Earth Speaking, especially in the collective so much, is like learning, and you've spoken of it here in this conversation, is like that shift from object to relationship, that shift from and from our earlier in our conversation, from like, okay, you got to do everything so you can achieve this thing so the rest of your life or eternity will be this way. It's like, okay, shifting out of that and into this other way of being. One of the things you've got to do, two of them actually, and you've spoken to both of them, is one, you got to create a space for it, and two, you got to learn, you got to cultivate energetic awareness. Learn that language of energy, because that's the language through which you speak with plants, through which you speak with yourself and spirit, and it's how you become in relationship with the living world, the living universe. Like, this is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like something that has been coming through a lot in terms of learning energy for me. Obviously, I think about energy a lot because that's like how we need to talk about essences. And I mean, it's a part of everything. So,
Vibrational medicine. Yeah. Energetic. Mm-hmm.
But something I've been really thinking about, because I'm always learning too. Like I know a lot, but I'm always learning, and I love to learn, and I never want that to stop. And something that again has been coming through to me about learning the language of energetics is really about reception, and receptivity rather is maybe a better way of using that word. It's not about looking for something. Like, I feel like it's almost like when you have a song stuck in your head and you're like, what is the name of that song? Like, oh, what is the name of it? And you're just obsessing over it. And it's almost like pushing it further and further away from you. And then you take a step back and start doing something else. And then the song name comes. It's very similar. It's like, I feel like energy wants to arrive and wants a vessel to be like received in. And, I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going with this exactly, except for in terms of learning the language of energy, that's been something that has really struck me lately. It's like the more I try to understand how the energy of a certain plant moves by like chasing after it or trying to figure it out or being like, okay, what does that feel like? And what does that mean? Then the further away I get from actually receiving it and learning it. And oftentimes it takes a while for me to like fully receive and like integrate everything that has come through around a certain plant or a blend or a space or a person or something like that. So I don't know. It's a practice for me to receive, and I don't know if that's helpful for anyone else to hear. But I think if you are trying to learn that language, imagine yourself being in a receptive space and allowing it to kind of arrive for you versus trying to like clamor after it, if that makes sense.
Totally. It totally does to me. I mean, that's such a shift from the way we were brought up typically in this society. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we have this like, I think a lot with plant medicine specifically, but we have this really strong desire to like know what the thing is and what does it do. And that's totally natural and normal. And I want to know this as much as anyone else. But you know, like there are many ways to experience the same thing. And so there's a lot more than just what's written down in the book. There's a lot more than just what I say about an essence, you know? So it's like part of learning that language is again to just be not seeking to know, but like receiving to learn, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I feel like asking questions creates this sort of void or vacuum through which then answers come, but they don't come in a way where you go like, it's like if even in like business. So for me in business, I run business very intuitively, but I still use strategy, but it's not like I'm going to do this strategy because this is what everyone said to do. It's like, I'll be like, yo, Earth Speak, Spirit Council, Universe, whoever's out there listening, you know, this is what I'm feeling called to. I have this vision and this feels aligned. Like, what do you want to create? And like, what would it take for us to create this in a happy, healthy way that like, you know, is actually creating more liberation for us and for the people, you know, putting all these things in. And then like something will like, I'll get an email or a book will really stand out to me or someone will say something and I'm like, oh, and that's that receiving moment. And it's like this like little ping, kind of like a zing. So
I know you have to make your peripheral self open, like available, you know, that peripheral self that's like, I'm walking down the street and then all of a sudden it's like, there's the thing, you know, or like I'm just driving in my car and then all of a sudden the song comes on with the one line that describes everything you need to hear. And paying attention to that, it takes a lot of effort sometimes, but it also can be very effortless. And I just think that like that type of tuning in to the peripheral body, or I don't know how else to describe it.
Well, I mean, I want to jump in here and say it's like coming into relationship with these other aspects of ourselves that we've been told we're just our mind and our physical body. And like we are these energetic beings that have these receptors and broadcasters and it's like, well, that is that peripheral self, these selves that are able to sense on such a different level. And it's coming into relationship with that as you and beginning to trust that. of like, that's right back to where we started, of like, it's not just your imagination, quote imagination, like this is actual communication and relationship and information that you can use.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, I love what you said about asking, because I actually had a really cool moment of that recently. I'm taking one of my good friends, Suzanne Stone. She's an herbalist, and she's so incredible and so creative, and also a musician. And yeah, she's a badass. But she is teaching this tree course, and yeah, we had to pick a tree ally at the start of the course, and so I kind of had an idea of what I thought it would be, and then I was like, but I'm just gonna kind of see who it actually is, and I don't even want to think about it. I just want them to show themselves to me. And so I asked. I was like, I got like really grounded, and I was like, all right, who's out there, like who is my ally for the year? Just show yourself to me. And I didn't go hunting for it. I didn't go looking for it. And like kind of 3 days in a row, it was just like pear, 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 pear. And then ever since then, it's like pear, pear. It's everywhere. I found a brass pear-shaped bell that rings so, like, it's such a
That
beautiful.
is so cool.
At my friend's shop, and I hadn't gone to see her in a while, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go, and I had to get something for my mom for her birthday, and then it was like just staring me right in the face, and I was like, what are you doing here? So I had to get it. And then I got this envelope actually from Suzanne, and on the inside were 2 pear stamps, but she didn't put them there. It was like an envelope that she had turned inside out from someone else and like mailed to me. And I was like, Suzanne, texting her.
Oh my gosh.
And she's like, I had no idea. They knew and wanted to be with you. And I was like, yeah, I guess they did. So asking is really cool, and it really does work. And I think the main trick is just, not getting in your own way, not trying to be like, kind of like side swiping and being like, well, I'm going to also be looking while you can't be looking.
You pay attention, but not seeking, grasping, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because then you can't take in what is coming from over here. You're just like trying to remember the name of the song.
I love that. I love that example of the pear too, because I think that's another thing where like, intuition versus imagination. And then this is also like intuition comes in. It's like this living relationship with the universe, which is so fucking powerful. Like there's literally no limits. When I watch these like space shows, they're like the multiverse and the thing, and there might be the, a universe within the multiverse that has completely different laws of physics. And I'm like, oh my God, anything's possible. Help. Like my brain melts. But, but that's so cool because it's like, we get to be in relationship with it, like spirit can speak through everything. It can speak through that bell. It can speak through that envelope, through that, and it's so freaking bizarre. And you don't need to understand how or why. You could try, but it'll bog your mind. You might end up scrambled like me. I don't know.
I mean, it's just like the why almost doesn't matter. It's like maybe the why is the last thing we need to know in that type of relationship. It's like maybe the why is what we'll find at the end of the relationship with that thing. Like I have no idea why pear is coming to me so strongly, but the more I work with it, and I've been working with pear every day, and I have like a little pear journal that I write in.
Do you have a pear essence?
I do. So my friend Robin from Fancy Dream Farm, she sent me a pear essence last year. And then, so I've been taking that a little bit, but then I started taking this pear thorn and leaf essence that I made on the first new moon of this year. And yeah, wild pears have thorns, which I had no idea about until Robin told me. But yeah, I have an essence that I work with, and I got pear juice and I drink it in the morning, and I try to like do a little research on pear as well. But I think, I don't know why again, it's coming for me like at this time in my life, but I know that I'll receive that why, or the answer to that. I'll receive the because when it's ready, like when it's ripe and when it's time. And like part of getting to the because is like experiencing this plant in all of its many, many ways, and experiencing the curiosity of the why. Like curiosity is so crucial, and it's something that gets lost so easily, especially when we have so much information at our fingertips. But it leads you everywhere. It leads you, I know it gets you into trouble sometimes, but
what is trouble even though? You know, it's just new awareness. It could suck, but hey, it's new awareness. Or it could be amazing.
Keeping open with that curiosity, it leads you into all of these really nutritive places for the most part. And like you said, Natalie, sometimes it does get you into trouble, but I feel like the times my curiosity has gotten me into trouble, it's been like a good kind of trouble. Even if it was like bad maybe at the time, it's totally informed my whole kind of perspective and my entire existence on this planet. So pear is like not getting me into any trouble. I think there are certain types of things that are going to be a little bit more gentle with your curiosity than others. So that's just something to keep in mind. But, you know, speaking about like imagination and creativity, and just to kind of like tie that off, you know, it's like part of the reason those things are so powerful is because they're led by curiosity and fed by curiosity as well. And, you know, when we lose that desire to be curious, then we become adults, so they say. But I think it's really that we lose like that connection to the intuitive and to that imagination and to that peripheral realm, to even receptivity. Because if we're not curious, then it, you know, to me that is that you already know everything, and that's just not true. I don't care who you are, you don't know everything in the whole universe. So there's got to be a little kind of smidgen of curiosity in there. Anyway.
I love that. I love that. I feel like it's a perfect place to wrap it up. You are going to be teaching. I mean, we could talk all day and then all day tomorrow and all day. Like, it's so fun to hang out with you. And
I miss you.
I miss you.
Minnesota Creek today. All the bloodroot is coming up there.
Ooh, pretty.
Trout lilies and blood.
Oh, I love them.
They're so cute.
The first essence I ever made was trout lily. And yeah, because there was I was just going to say a shitload. There was a shitload of them. It's my podcast. I can say what I want. I let everyone else cuss. I can cuss. So there was a shitload of them. It's just like they're so delicate and beautiful. I feel like shitload is so grotesque in terms of describing them. But it, you know, in my old neighborhood when I lived in Durham, we had like 100 acres of parkland in the neighborhood, and there was just these swaths of them in the woods. And I was like, well, who are these people? You know, the plants are people, same thing. Who are these? And I just felt so drawn to them, and I had never made an essence. And I was like, I think it's probably, I made one other essence that day because I was like, cool, I'll just try another one. I don't even remember what it was, but so like, it's like still the only one I've ever made. And then years later, like last year, Naomi she loves doing this thing called flower. She finds your constitutional flower essence or something. Like, what's one that really helps your constitution? And I didn't tell her anything about trout lily or anything. And it was freaking trout lily. And I was like, whoa, like, yeah. So.
Wait, do you still have your trout lily essence?
I do somewhere. You know, I'm terrible at labeling things, but I might have labeled, you know, I haven't used it in a while. Naomi sent me some. She had some she had made. So she sent me some.
Maybe it'll be nice to take it later today.
Mm-hmm. So, Chanelle, you're going to be bestowing upon us some wisdom of how to make essences and use them and be in a relationship with them and everything magical like that. So you want to share a little bit about that and also what you offer and where people can find you?
Yeah, so it's going to be in April, towards the end of April. And yeah, we'll go over how I like to teach about making essences. So I wish we could all be in person making one together, but um, we'll have to make do with what we have. So we'll talk about making essences, and we'll talk about how to work with essences and kind of just like what an essence is. I think there's a lot of confusion about them, what they are, how they work, why we use them. So we'll talk about that. And we'll also probably talk about essencing more and like how we can do that, and specific essences that are nice for offering to spirit and land, and also essences that can be nice for helping us to dive into a deeper kind of connection with that practice and with practicing with essences in general. So it'll be fun. Let's see, what else was I going to say? Like we've been talking about, I'm not on Instagram, but I have a newsletter I usually send out each month, and that's a great way to kind of stay on top of what I've got going on. I also have my website, which is moonbymoonapothecary.com. And yeah, I love getting emails, and sometimes even we can talk about snail mailing together, things like that. So those are the main spots right now. There might be more one day.
And do you offer, herbal consultations and herbal medicine and stuff, and anything specific that you want to let people know about?
Yeah, okay. So I do offer consultations, and they're called Beside the Stream consults. And again, we kind of spoke about this a little bit, but they're really conversation based. I ask lots of questions, and you get to tell me your story. And by the end, we've gone quite far into your tale. But they're really great for any kinds of things that are coming up for you, whether it's physical ailments or emotional things going on or spiritual guidance that you need. So, and I always pair blends off with my clients afterwards. I also do tarot sessions for people, and let's see, I do teach. I'm kind of doing more mentorships these days, so one-on-one kinds of teaching. Although I do have some of these bigger classes planned, like the ones with Earthspeak. And yeah, I'll be offering some remote ritual healing sessions for people, but not until later on in the spring. I'll be unveiling that. And again, you can kind of stay on top of when and what that will be like via my newsletter and or my website. So thanks for reminding me to say that part, Natalie.
I'm like, I love selling stuff, but not for the sake of selling, because there's like so many beautiful things that we offer. So I'm excited. Thank you, Chanelle. Thank you for being on the show. And I'm so excited about our workshop coming up. And it was so awesome to hang out with you today.
Thanks for taking all this time, and I'll see you soon. And thank you again so much. It's always a pleasure.
All the roads are windy.
Listen to over 200 free Earthspeak podcast episodes on your favorite podcast app, and visit earthspeak.love to learn about our collective community and workshops.